Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. We are on episode 142. I am H.A. Conrad, here as always with my intrepid and marvelous co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, equal measures marvelous and intrepid.
Indeed. So we are wrapping up season 6 of The Walking Dead. It's been a bittersweet slog. There were things about this season that I definitely found that I liked more than watching it the first time, and I was able to look at the bright side of things. But in equal measure, there were also the things that infuriated me. But I'm looking forward to wrapping this up with you in what I think was probably one of the most debated, angry-making finales I think that the show has had.
Yeah, in a season of cliffhangers, this was the biggest doozy cliffhanger of all time. So,
right, and I think because of we've noted before that the writers tend to go their own way. They don't always follow the graphic novel, but there are things that were reminiscent of the graphic novel that made everybody kind of wonder what was going to happen at the end of this. But looking forward to talking about that with you. We don't have too many news items this week. We're doing a little bit of at least for us, a double header episode just because I will be unavailable to record. But it doesn't make it any less good. So thanks, as always, for listening, and let's dive into it. So first up, we have an episode called East. This is episode 82 in the entire Walking Dead series. But it is episode 15 of season 6.
We begin East with a death count on the Savior side of 54, and that is quickly escalated, although the skyrocketing death count of Saviors is going to taper off shortly. But we start with a kind of an interesting pre-credits cold open with just some scenes of like blood dripping on the road, and slightly muffled voices of Carol and another person. Mm-hmm. It's clear that she's gotten herself into a fracas shortly after leaving Alexandria, and it's a really quick cold open. And some of them tend to go on for a minute, or this one's I feel like 15 seconds or something, and then you're just in the credits. But it's an interesting start, and then we get through the credits and launch into some Johnny Cash montage.
Yep. Anytime you hear Johnny Cash, you know it's going to be dark.
He is like very closely associated with zombies now.
He is the soundtrack of the zombie apocalypse. I would say him and Tom Waits, their music survives above all others. I think, at least in this series, songs from both Tom Waits and Johnny Cash are the most used in the series. So, or at least not. You know what? I am also thinking of some zombie films, so we've got that going on too. Mm-hmm. So, Johnny Cash probably used a little bit more, but anytime you hear him, there's a sense of foreboding.
In this case, the soundtrack is used to show Alexandrians kind of coping with recent events, like Daryl is playing with the wooden soldier that Dwight had given him, or that he had taken from Dwight. He's like burning up about the whole Denise ambush.
Yep.
Carol is sneaking away, I think. We got that going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty quickly the episode goes from, and we also have a scene with Rick and Michonne where he's talking some stupid game like the world is ours, we know how to take it. And you're just like, oh Rick, it's your bubble, man. Your bubble's about to burst so badly. But Carol then leaves the compound, and quickly thereafter, so does Daryl, and that kind of throws everything off. And it's those two acts that also really help get everything into alignment for the final episode and the final scene. And this begins a series of events that I find very unlikely that the Saviors would be able to capitalize on as well as they do. That's I'm just going to plant that seed here at the beginning.
I'm going to plant that seed too. I'm also going to plant the seed that, especially in this episode, much like what we used to laugh about, that Carl was never in the motherfucking house. I feel like in this case, none of the fighters are back at the motherfucking ranch. In this case, you've got, because we've got Alexandria set up in such a way they are learning to defend themselves, but nobody is as good as defending this compound as Rick, Michonne, Daryl, Carol, even Morgan. Although Morgan obviously has his own rules and things going on. Glenn, Rosita, everybody. And I feel like all of them independently did things here that left the compound vulnerable and they weren't communicating with each other. And I just feel like it was an unlikely thing to happen given how much they have learned through their histories and also through what's going on with Alexandria and definitely with the threat of the Saviors. I don't think that anybody at this point feels that there isn't a threat, like they know there is, especially with what has happened with Denise. And so I just found this is one of those things that I was talking about that just infuriated me. To me, there is no way that all of these people would have left the compound as vulnerable as they did without somehow making a plan and just going off willy-nilly, without some sort of tactical decision to be made. It just felt like they weren't cooperating and they just didn't communicate at all, and all of them seemed surprised by the decisions that other people have made. So I'll throw that in as a seed.
Yeah, definitely not much in the way of teamwork happening. But when you also think back, just an episode or two ago, Maggie and Carol are in a tough bind and just like come out of that having murdered, 10 more people and no worse for the wear, essentially. So maybe they just all believe in their own abilities a little too much, and it's hubris that is what they want. And let's also mention that this is a Scott Gimple, Channing Powell script, or I don't know what the difference is between story and teleplay, but Channing Powell did both the story and the teleplay. And then Michael Satrazemis is the director for this episode. 12.3 million viewers. So yeah, things kind of quickly deteriorate. Rick goes from blissful waking up with Michonne and spooning and to like, oh gosh darn it, what's going on with my crew? Everybody's running around, everybody's going crazy. Carol is not long on the road in her Mad Max car before things go extremely badly too.
Can we also talk again about how the roads and things like that, again, in terms of tactical, in groups planning, making their plans and being tactical, like it's pretty fast. Like she's on the road and runs into this group of saviors almost like pretty quickly. Like there's no stealth. She's got her Mad Max car. There's just nothing going on here. And in some ways, I think that you are, or at least I assumed that she is in some way looking for trouble. Maybe she's looking to just be taken out, and obviously she's suffering some problems from her whole run-in with the Saviors before. But still, it seems a little bit easy, not easy, but just it seems a little bit ridiculous to me that she runs into them so very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it is 12 kilometers. They even say like how far away Alexandria is, tipping their hand that they are.
They know, yeah.
They know way more than we want them to know, or that Rick's group would like them to know. She's been on the road probably, 12 kilometers is, what is that, like 6 miles or something?
Yep.
It's not a long time. She's been on the road for maybe 10 minutes before she runs into a pickup truck full of saviors. Hey, and here's another thing. Saviors are going out in these groups of like 5 or 6.
Right.
And I feel like every time they do that, those people are all killed. And so they really should stop doing that.
Yeah, but I don't know that 1 or 2 is going to help them anymore. I think they just want to keep killing them off. And in this case, there's no exception here. Carol falls back on her usual, I am a helpless person. She does a pretty good job with this. You would think at this point, though, the Saviors with their communications and reconnaissance know that there is a silver-haired fox kind of running around with who is a lot more formidable than they would have you believe, although I guess she has pretty much killed off everybody who could speak to that, correct?
Yeah, there's no witnesses.
Right. So she does pretty well with this, and I'll have to admit, it's pretty satisfying watching her take out some of these guys.
I don't think she's really acting though anymore. When she's crying, like, and the tears are running down her face, and her voice has got the wobble to it. I don't. She really doesn't want to have to shoot these people,
I
but
guess
they
she
keep
doesn't,
forcing her hand.
but she, she's like, don't make me do this. It's like, okay, I don't know. I just think she, it, and this is, once again, they are the ones that are on the short end of the stick here. She destroys most of them, injures all of them except for two. I mean, she
And
injures
it's
them
it's a
still, but
cool. She has a really cool, like, little up the sleeve ambush thing that
yeah,
she's
that was
sewn.
pretty
She's
nice.
sewn a scorpion, I think, machine pistol into her sleeve, and is able to just take out the whole group basically in one fell swoop. And that's pretty amazing. That was a really cool scene, even if, like, I'm not on board with her. I like the fact that she's thinking more about her decisions, because we talked about how
Hmm.
stupid she was being when she was killing the wolf, uh,
True.
while he was actively trying to save Denise. So yeah, great that she's thinking, but now she's almost like gone too far in the other way, and
Hmm.
I don't like seeing her having this emotional breakdown and not. It's like, oh, you left Alexandria and your group because you didn't want to have to kill anymore, and look, you have just had to kill six more people, or
Immediately,
yeah, five
almost
more, I guess.
immediately.
Yeah,
So.
within 10 minutes of leaving. It's so what is the world, what is the universe trying to tell you? But of course, we don't actually get a conclusion to this message this even in this season.
Right, and
But
then
it's
there's also the thing. It's like, okay, so what's your end game here? You came out almost immediately. You end up having to kill these people. So there's just going to be more of that out there. You might as well be, at least in some ways, like helping a community build. She's kind of off the deep end at this point, though, and you're right. She's having a little bit of a nervous breakdown.
she could be thinking that this murder spree that she just had to do is also still connected to her association with Alexandria, and the further she gets away from there, the less likely that is to happen.
Oh,
But I
true.
think that's naive. That I mean, I can think, I can see how she could rationalize it that way,
Right.
because they want her to give up Alexandria. They are there for the reason why she's trying to get away.
Right. And of course, because Carol's Carol, we've got. It's an interesting thing because Rick and Morgan, Tobin lets them know what happened, shows them the note, and they immediately, decide to go after her. And it's interesting because there's a few different things going on. It's fascinating to me that Rick is the person who, when they were at the prison, banished Carol for her behavior, but now he's pursuing her. Morgan, who doesn't see eye to eye with a lot of the things that Carol does, but maybe sees her as a young Padawan, somebody that he can teach, or somebody that he sees that may be struggling with some of the same issues that he was. Also wants to go after her. So it's just interesting that he and Rick are the team that end up going for her, as opposed to Daryl, who
They're
doesn't
also the
know, who doesn't yet know, I guess, but still it's interesting that this is
yeah.
the pairing that ends up being her search party.
True. Morgan and Rick are the only search party duo that go out this episode that basically succeed in their mission. At least
Hmm.
50% of them make it back to Alexandria. Uh, so everybody else who's gone out, the Daryls, the Glens, the Rositas, the Michonnes, all fail miserably.
Yeah.
Um, One other thing. Oh, yeah. So the death toll for Saviors is now up to 54. No,
Hmm.
sorry. It was 54. It is now 58, because she killed four of them. One is like unknown. Um, Rick and Morgan, when they get to the site of this death spree, Rick has the realization that these are saviors, that it's not over. We haven't finished anything, and Morgan's like, "Yeah, you started something, because I'm not gonna tell you I told you so." And this is a pretty, what's the word? They're kind of butting heads this episode,
Hmm.
because Rick is maybe even further down this path than Carol in the
Right.
in the terms of being a unapologetic murderer.
Hmm.
So it's interesting, like, to that extent, and it almost felt like later on there's some scenes where they're fighting together, but it's like they're really pissed off at each other,
Yeah,
and it
they're
seems like
definitely at odds in what
Rick wants
they're.
to murder Morgan. It almost feels like, but then they manage to leave it off with a joke that helps.
That power bar joke keeps on giving.
Yeah, it's the reference that just won't die.
Right. And we got that going on. We also have Daryl on his vengeance hunt, basically because he just wants to take out Dwight. He really can't let go of the fact that he feels responsible for Denise's murder. Though I would argue, given her poor behavior, if it hadn't been Dwight, I think it would have been some other saviors that took her out, or some other stupid action on her part. That's just the way it goes. And in to try to either save him from himself or whatever, we got Glenn, Michonne, and Rosita. Trying to just make sure that nothing even worse happens. It's again, it feels like to me this whole group and the events that surrounded them felt like very sloppy writing to me, and just didn't make sense. And it reminded me a lot of the Glenn and Enid back and forth, like convincing somebody that they got to like come back, and it just felt very lazy to me to get them out there. And what ultimately happens is that they all get captured by the saviors. So
It's kind of crazy that Dwight has. It seems like these are the same people who ambushed Denise on the train tracks. Like, I can recognize one of the other long-haired dudes who were with Dwight. They're basically still very close to where they did that fight. They haven't. It seems like maybe they haven't gone back to their sanctuary. And not only have they waited for Daryl to come back, then they catch Glenn and Michonne, and then wait even longer for Daryl to come back a second time.
Right.
It's just like Dwight has
doesn't make
decided to
sense.
live. He's decided to live in this patch of forest until he accomplishes his mission. And it's also an example of the saviors having this ridiculous, like spider-like ability to draw things to them and into their webs rather. And I felt like it was a little odd.
Well, it's
Also,
odd. It's
yeah.
odd as well, just because they've been not successful in fighting this group. So they somehow have this ability to draw people into their web, but yet they all usually get killed. And
Until
that to
now.
me, until now. But it just feels like they're, even with their careful communication that we have seen, which I guess could explain some of it. They are very coordinated. They are tactical. They're not doing stupid stuff, or supposedly they aren't. But then we see all the other stuff that they do related to the Carol Maggie imprisonment, even the satellite station and things like that. So it defies logic that they are so careful and coordinated, that the group has been successful against them, and then immediately the tables turn, in this episode at least, and the saviors just keep on winning, which doesn't make sense given the success that Rook's group has had up until this point. But maybe it's that they are learning. They have enough numbers that they're able to figure things out, and they can sacrifice those folks. But that is like a lot of people to lose in a world where there's not many survivors. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Just doesn't I think this is what troubled me, that if the writers had been a little bit more careful in how the events unfolded, I would have found it more interesting and more believable.
We get glimpses of people wearing body armor that makes you think that they're from the kingdom, from the books, because it's very close to how those guys were depicted. So I think there was a lot of excitement on the internet. Basically when we saw the one guy
In his basically his little like night outfit, which is kind of
yeah.
cool.
He's using a spear from the hilltop. At least that's what Rick thinks. And then when Morgan and Rick part ways, Morgan's like, "I'm gonna keep looking for Maggie. You're needed at Alexandria." And they part ways, and they make the joke about the protein bar. They leave the spear on the ground, and I'm like, "Why would you?
Right.
Why would you not take that with you?"
Another piece. So I was curious about what you thought, and it reminded me again when we saw this. What about the use of horses in this world? Doesn't ever seem to end in a good way. We have seen it.
We've not seen it work out. No.
No, ever, never. And so that was kind of an interesting choice. Plus, they are really loud, so you hear horses you can hear coming from a mile away. And so, in addition to the fact that they are not stealthy for anybody like the saviors who are out there, I also feel like they're going to attract walkers just moving through the woods or whatever they're doing. I just don't think that this is a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense in a post, gasoline world that you would try to use them, but they are giant movable taco stands for sure. And I think well, maybe we'll get to see how the kingdom manages not to get their horses killed. Maybe it's just as simple as they can easily outrun a pack of zombies. It's just so if you're smart enough and have a little foresight, you're not going to have a Rick in Atlanta problem or
Well,
a
I thought we would see more of the horses being, at least up until this point, that they'd be covered in zombie guts to camouflage them. Maybe that is the way to go, at least for the zombies. But we're not really seeing. This horse looks pretty pristine.
yeah, and very calm considering I don't know how horses would deal with dead things wandering around trying to eat them if
Right.
they wouldn't be a little more panicky and uncontrollable.
But anyway,
So Maggie gets a haircut and then immediately goes into like prenatal distress.
I think it's because when her hair was cut off, all of her power left her. So there you go. Bad idea, cutting the hair. It's just like Samson and Delilah.
They've been making Lauren Cohan look really pale and like, unhealthy.
Yeah,
And even though this
similar to
episode began with her and Glenn in the shower, uh, her hair looks really greasy
yeah.
a lot when it's long. It's just like, all right, you guys, you just showed us that you guys were in the. I mean, maybe they don't have shampoo. That could be a
They
thing.
have shampoo. Come on. But no, you're right. I noticed this as well. So it makes you feel a little bit. It feels like it makes more sense for her to ask to have it chopped off because it's getting a little like rangy looking. But like last episode, it looked just fine. So so it feels a little contrived.
They're just like once you get pregnant, your hair gets super greasy. Also, it's like heavy as the head that wears a crown. Deanna Tova Feldman, they made her look
Yep.
horrible. So maybe they're just going through the same process. It's the whole, presidents going really gray when they've been in office for like a year. It's the same
Yeah.
sort of thing.
So, and we've got, the whole Daryl Glenn Michonne thing. And do you, again, I think part of why I keep circling back to this is just that among the people that are in this group, Michonne and Daryl specifically, but also Rosita, Glenn is usually a little bit more sloppy. But Daryl, Michonne, and Rosita all have capability of being stealthy and also are very aware of what is like surrounding them.
Yeah.
Do you find it likely that they could have been ambushed this easily?
Yeah, I mean it's lame, but this is the same group of people. If it's really Dwight's same crew, whoever was left from his original ambush, who were 10 feet away from Daryl and Rosita on the next to the train tracks, and they had no idea. And they were able to shoot Denise in the face.
I just, in any case, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. Clearly, because we can't.
Nothing.
But they got captured, and I remember being like the first time watching this, actually saying out loud, "No way!" Like I was so pissed about it happening because I was like, "Great, another cliffhanger." Little did I know was to come.
It turns out that Dwight is this master tracker, just like Daryl, except Daryl's not as good as him.
Maybe
And
it was the face burn that gave him these powers because he was not very good at any of this before, or maybe
No,
he was just shamming.
he definitely got caught up by Daryl a couple times, and the episode ends with a pretty big cliffhanger too. Except that they also soften the blow by having Dwight's voice come through after he shoots Daryl. Blood goes all over the screen, so I'm sure people screamed out loud when this happened originally when it aired. But then he's like, "You'll be fine."
Yeah, I did not scream. I just was like, "Oh, that's bullshit. They're not going to kill off Daryl." So there would be a mutiny. I'm not saying that it can never happen, but at this point, I was like, they're not going to do that yet. But
So that's kind of the end of East.
Yep.
Carol's in the wind. Morgan's out there looking for her. Now we've lost four of the most capable people in Alexandria have now been captured. I think we all assume, because of the way things have been going against the Saviors, that they're gonna like fight their way out of this. But we don't get to see that in this episode. And then the next one that begins is called Last Day on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode has suddenly 2 million more viewers because it's the season finale. It's Greg Nicotero directed, Scott Gimple and Matthew Negrady writing it. So Gimple weighing in on the last two here. And this one, um, I mean, it's got a lot of elements that should work, but my reaction when I first watched this was disbelief
Mm.
and yeah, just like there's no way that this would have gone down the way that it unfolds, in my
Nope.
opinion. So it begins with people are freaking out to try and get Maggie some help, which leads to a lot of discussion. There's like a long scene, I felt very long, between Carl and Enid,
Mm-hmm.
with some kind of like overly dramatic teenage yelling at each other about feelings, which I was
I
like,
know.
I'm not so into this. I'm not so interested in what you guys have to say to each other. He does lock her in a closet. And it's funny because what I remember, the reaction I have to this is Enid gets locked in a closet. And instead of saying, like, well, what if I die in here because you've locked me in a closet without food or water?
Right.
Her reaction is, what if you don't come back from your road trip? Very foreshadowy. There's a lot of elements of this departure that are very foreshadowy and shot in a way that make you think, oh, Jesus, there's something terrible's about to happen because the show is drawing things along in this certain way and having all these different discussions that seem way too serious for what they're doing, which is
Yeah.
a simple FedEx mission, like get X to B, pick up the package and deliver it to Hilltop. That's it.
Yep.
So yeah, Carl dumps Enid in a closet and goes on with his day. We have this long string of people getting into the camper, and Rick is just like, yeah, sure, come on, yeah, no problem.
Right.
It's kind of comedic, no?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. This whole thing, this little weird road trip doesn't, I don't know. It really doesn't make any sense to me. Again, it's like the
Well, the reason
camper.
they're doing it makes perfect sense.
No, the reason that they're doing it makes sense, but their way of going about it made no sense to me. Again, they already know that their capable people are out there. They know that Alexandria is vulnerable. Um, and not that they know what's happened yet to our group of intrepid heroes outside, but they're leaving Alexandria once again vulnerable, but they're also taking one of the most conspicuous vehicles to take Maggie to Hilltop. I just think that that was kind of strange. And this whole thing was weird, and they just kind of and it did this episode felt like this episode felt in it just so long, and maybe it was meant to feel this way, just
It
like
was an
everybody.
hour.
I mean, it felt so long in the sense that it just felt like they kept running into barriers, and I think that was deliberate, that they were supposed to feel like rats in a trap, like there was no way out, and I think that's somewhat what the viewer was supposed to feel. But it
Yeah.
just felt ridiculous to me that the saviors would be this organized. I just don't buy that this is what would happen, that they would track every single thing that they were doing, that they would be this evenly dispersed, that every single path that they took would be like thwarted. I just didn't buy it.
We also, as they're getting into the camper, Gabriel comes up to Rick and does this speech that definitely sounds like a flight attendant before a flight. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
in the case of an incursion, find the exit closest to you. Are you going to be satisfied with my service as the defender of Alexandria? It's so
Yeah, it's
weird.
it's weird, and again, this is this whole weird thing with Gabriel being the savior or the protector of Judith. Like, yeah, I know the dude's been converted and all of that, and at this point, I can understand a little bit more why Rick is trusting him, because he has proven himself at this point, so that makes more sense to me. But this is a very, very strange speech and interaction, and felt very stilted. To the level that I think if I were Rick, I'd be a little bit like, maybe we should leave some backup to watch after Judith, because he seems a little bit like out there. But no, Rick is confident in his ability to be the lone savior and lone protector of Alexandria, apparently.
Yeah, along with Spencer, the most useful guy in the
Yeah,
cast.
no, that's what I mean. Like you're leaving like two of the weakest links that have both. I mean, Gabriel's doing a little bit better by now, but still, like Spencer's still an idiot.
At least Scott is back. He's back up on his feet. They show him closing the gate along with short-haired brunette chick whose
Hmm.
name I don't think we've ever learned. So they've got a couple of people who are at least still capable. Tobin is there, building things, doing whatever Tobin does.
Yeah, but these are
But yeah,
not your A team of
no,
protectors.
definitely not the A team. Even though Enid tries to sell Carl on the power of Alexandria now that they've been quote unquote trained.
Mm.
Meanwhile, Morgan finds Carol. She's not doing great.
No,
Uh,
she's got a belly wound. She's bleeding. She basically just wants to die. She's pretty pathetic in this case, and the savior that she injured is just like tracking her down, even though he's dying. And I don't know that he would have made it. I don't know that either of them would have made it to where they did end up. But there's also within this particular the whole Carol Morgan scene, Rick and his group run across like a victim of the Saviors who's being tortured, and they kind of interrupt them.
yeah.
And he mentions a library, and this is where we get to see the library, although they don't say that outright because they don't know. But we see that this is a place where lots of people have died. There's lots of walkers kind of hanging out in strange ways. Like there's somebody that was either they hung themselves or they hanged themselves or they were hanged. So like there's definitely you're learning different bits of the story here, even though you don't necessarily. I didn't put it together at first when I first saw this, but
Oh, yeah. I mean, once Morgan pauses under a sign that says fiction,
yeah, then
you're
you
like,
got it. But I mean,
oh
up
yeah,
until that
okay,
point, yeah, it was
yeah.
like,
Okay.
oh, there it is. But
Well, what are the odds? What are the odds that Carol and
I
Morgan are
know,
gonna end up in the library that the Saviors have clearly just purged
ravaged.
of people? They're
Um,
pretty slim,
yep.
but it still makes for a nice little kind of. It's one of these classic Scott Gimple like show the story behind the story, and we get a little bit more background about this guy who clearly Rick's group doesn't care about because they watch him get the X spray painted on his stomach at the first
Yeah.
ambush, and then by the fifth ambush, he's being hanged.
Yep.
And they're like, "Yeah, don't shoot him down. We need the bullets." It's just it's pretty grim.
Yep.
So we have the first ambush introduces Simon, although not by name. I don't think we actually learned his name until the next season.
No, we
But
don't.
Simon, God, I forget the name of the actor who plays him. He is, though, the actor who, oh, it's Stephen Ogg.
Yep.
Um, he does the voice acting in Grand Theft Auto 5, the video game. He plays Trevor in that. He also was in Westworld playing a bad guy when that show was had its first season earlier, or in
He's
2016, I guess.
definitely good at the villains.
He is a great villain, and Trevor's actually kind of a protagonist, but he's a protagonist who is insane and a meth addict.
Ah, nice. See, I remember he was definitely on Law and Order, or like a lot of those, like you see him a lot. Like he looked familiar to me. I'm like, oh, how do I know this guy? And like, I know he's been in a few other things, but oddly enough, that was the where I placed him from first was Law and Order.
Yeah, he's on that. He's been on Better Call Saul, Person of Interest, some of these kinds of shows. He's Canadian. So this ambush only has 8 people, including him. There are 6 people in the camper, not including Maggie, who can. I mean, one of them's Eugene, so he's kind of useless. But this is where, in hindsight being 2020, Rick's group should have driven the camper around a corner, disembarked, and gone back on
Yep.
foot and murdered these guys.
Yep.
Clearly, that's what we can all agree on. I mean, maybe there would have been more saviors in the woods, but yeah, this just begins the first of 7, I think, 6 or 7 ultimate ambushes
Ugh.
that they have to contend with,
I just
and it's
this is why I found it so frustrating is that at some like after the first one, you realize, okay, this is a little bit more serious. Did you, watching this, I didn't really buy that they would just keep running away from them. I mean, I know that they've got Maggie, and that's tough, and that it makes it difficult to move around. But I just feel like the camper is a liability. It's a big target. It's easy to find. And so I just feel like they would have decided to take matters into their own hands and try to basically get through in another way, as opposed to just driving that camper around as much as they did. So that was what bothered me so much about this particular sort of chase.
Well, it certainly seems like this group of saviors, they've shown them chasing this guy down, and then they drag him into the street and wait to do their ambush. But it's like they just know too much about the timetable and the destination and everything that's going on with the camper. They know, apparently. How do they know that they are so desperate to get to Hilltop? How do they know they're even going there?
Right.
If anything, they should be like, we've just captured 3 of 4 of their people, and they're going to be trying to get them back, but they don't know where they are. So how would they know what their destination is going to be? And that is like the underlying problem with all of these ambushes. And he's just saying, hey, good luck getting where you're going. And they are only blocking roads, as far as we know. They're going to Hilltop.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense that they could know this.
No.
Unless they've got a mole, which that has not been the case, as far as we know.
But even if they did have a mole, how is that mole communicating all the real-time things that are, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't, that doesn't make sense to me at this point.
This show has no problem with walkie-talkies with like 30-mile range, so.
Right. But they would have probably shown that or something, but they didn't do that. So there's that. Go ahead.
We go back and forth between every ambush and a scene with Carol and Morgan, and basically is kind of how it works. Mm-hmm. Or is Carol by herself? So Carol is unrepentant. She's not going to go back to Alexandria, despite Morgan being like, look what's going on here. This is a disaster. You're a mess. And she's just saying like, hey, you know what? If you care about people, you're going to have to kill. And I don't want to do that. So even though she's kind of coming around to his way of looking at life, and not wanting to have to kill, her response is divorce yourself of all relationships. And he is saying, no, people are everything. That's the only reason we go forward. They're just not communicating. She even holds a gun up to him at one point, and then it's like, I'm not going to really shoot you. Just please go away.
Yep.
And then we have Second Ambush.
Mm-hmm.
Second Ambush has no recognizable saviors. It's 16 people and vehicles across the street. They do a little bit of shooting as the camper rolls away. Here's another question. What would have happened if Rick's group had surrendered to them here? I guess they would have been they would just take them to Negan, and he would do the same dramatic thing. The drama. We have several ambushes to get through before we even get to the ridiculously long, I think it was 15 minutes, that final scene.
Yes, and it's so annoying.
Well, it certainly is after the first time you watch it. Carol then ditches Morgan after he's cleaning up the area of the library. This is kind of the scene where we find out exactly the significance of where they are, and and then she's gone, and he goes after her, riding a horse down a deserted street. That was actually a pretty cool shot.
Yeah.
With zombies coming at him. I thought that was a cool shot.
That was a nice shot.
Third ambush is the zombie chain.
Yep. With some very key trophies attached. I thought it was pretty rough. Michonne's they cut off one of her dreadlocks or 2 of her dreadlocks, and that's attached. And what did they had something from Carl? The hat, was it the hat?
No, Carl's with them. It was Daryl's
No, not Carl.
shirt.
Sorry, it was Daryl's shirt. So
but there's some good makeup here. This is some strong Nicotero right here.
Yep, he did a good job. So there's that stuff going on. And you do have that feeling of horror from Rick's group, where it's at this point they're feeling, and maybe, you can excuse some of their behavior just because they're so shocked and they want to get their people back, and now they definitely feel like they're backed into a corner. And with Rick's new, not that he would feel any differently, but now he feels this way about Michonne, and they've just been talking. He jinxed himself clearly by saying all the stuff that he did that day.
Yeah.
But
That was that morning. Yeah.
Yep. But not joking about power bars anymore, are you, man? So they've got that going on, and but I just felt like the lead up was so contrived and silly, and they're going through all this stuff. Like the saviors are going through the trouble of chaining all these walkers, and I mean, I know that what they were trying to show is just how much power and deliberation and I guess time the saviors had, that they have all the time in the world because they are blocking every single path that they're on. But all of these traps would mean that you have to have a huge number of people to put these things into place. And this trap with the walkers, and then there's the next one with the wood, like that wood trap, the one with all the logs piled up. That's
Yeah.
gonna take a lot of time.
And that's after there's a fourth ambush now with 40 people,
Right.
which is like the most we've seen yet. And we're like, holy crap, that's almost as many saviors as
We've
Rick's group
killed.
has already killed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and here's the thing. The chain of zombies almost makes no sense, other than for Rick to start getting more freaked out, because they get to go through it anyway, and it just lets Rick know that that he's being herded. It goes to inform his the more terrified that he looks as the episode goes on. But what does it really do for the saviors? They would have gone that way anyway. They were planning on going that way. The chain doesn't change anything.
Right. It doesn't. So I don't know.
Other than it lets them know that they have hostages. Does that change anything? Not really, because there's nothing they can do about that.
Right.
And we still don't know the motivation of the saviors. Do they think that Rick's group knows that they have their people? Or is this their first time that they're like, hey, let's let them know that we have their people? Because that's going to do what exactly? I'm not sure.
I don't know, psychological damage or something. I don't know.
Also, Rick's group is acting a certain way because of, as you've said, they've got Maggie, and they want to get her from A to B as fast as possible. So that's why I assume that's one of the reasons why they're not just getting out and shooting. That's why they didn't get out and just shoot the first ambush. But they're acting in a way that is not like them. They're usually much more aggressive. So why there's probably only 4 saviors at the zombie chain. There's not a lot. You see a couple of people ducking up and down. There doesn't seem to be that many people there. And it's very unlikely that Rick's group, without a medical emergency, wouldn't have gotten out and just killed those guys for shooting at them.
Right.
So I don't know. There's so many unknowns and so many variables that, yes, this all just goes to underscore the fact, as you already said, it's very unlikely that the saviors could have pulled this off, knowing their exact route, having all the time to do all these massive undertakings like stringing up 6 zombies together and cutting down 100 trees, maybe. It looked like about 100 trees.
Well, and then the other part is that the amount of fuel that they're wasting by driving around and following Rick's group and all these things don't, like, if there's an easier way, you're not going to waste fuel just chasing around these people. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be using your resources, like, especially if you do really feel like you have them sort of in a vice. Why waste your time doing all this? That doesn't make sense.
Why go to all this trouble when you could just drive your 100 or so fighters to the front gates of Alexandria and have the same exact effect?
And nip it in the bud. It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's kind of all these things definitely bothered me while watching this episode, and bothered me even more rewatching it, because I was like, oh, maybe as I'm watching it this time, I'll figure out why they decided to go this way. And I just think, as I said before, I think it was very sloppy writing and sloppy execution of the storyline.
It's all just to build up to Negan's well delivered, but so mustache twirly, and that's just the way all the saviors are. Even Hero, the guy who was talking from the back of the pickup truck, was such a mustache twirler.
I know.
And Simon's character is like a gleeful mustache twirler. So it's nutty.
And
Carol, in the meantime,
it's interesting though because I feel like it was deliberate in the mustache twirling way that he was doing this, reminiscent of the first interaction we saw with the saviors between Daryl and Abraham, and Rosita.
hmm
No, sorry, Sasha. When the head savior was monologuing, and
yeah,
our heroes got out of this. So I think that there was they were trying to have a parallel there. And I think the audience was hoping that there would be some last minute rescue, but Morgan or somebody would show up, and that this would not go the way that it was. And I think that it was deliberate to show those things in the same way.
yeah. Well, there was no more RPGs because they wasted it on a lake.
Yeah,
But
on
just one of those,
walkers.
man, one of those would have taken out a whole bunch more. That ambush where there's 40 of them standing on the road, hell, you could have killed a good 15 of them right there.
Yep.
That'd be nice. Anyway, Carol is still messing up big time. She's like so determined to do this all by herself, and she's given Morgan the slip. But then the Savior somehow catches up to her before Morgan does, even though he's on horseback, and the Savior has been walking like a zombie. And what trail is he even following? Doesn't I don't know.
No, I don't know.
But this is where she really shows her death wish, which I don't think was that clear before the scene when she's like he shoots her a second time, or maybe it's a third time before she's like, yeah, this is great, just do it. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to die. And she almost talks him into it when Morgan arrives and does something pretty unexpected, shooting him
Yeah.
5 times, which is like now Carol's philosophy is the one that seems to be carrying more weight because he cares about Carol and he wants to save her life. He is forced to use. He's too far away to use his stick, even though he has a ninja horse that managed to get within 15 feet of these two people
I
without
know.
anybody hearing it. He's still too far away to use the stick, so he shoots the guy, and then
He does look sad about it.
he, sure,
He
yeah.
looks a little tortured about it.
And then the Kingdom guys. Well, we don't know who they are, but let's just say the Kingdom guys show up and seem like cool dudes right away. And
Well,
there's a little handshake.
and of course, Morgan's decision to help one of them escape, against the wishes of Rick, because Rick was totally ready to destroy him. He's like, see, my philosophy worked, and so because he immediately says, "Oh, I took care of your horse" or something like that. I don't know. And they do offer them help
Yeah, and so it seems like Carol's going to be fine. Although I'm pretty sure like she's been shot. All right, in
a
the
lot.
abdomen, she's been shot in the arm and in the leg. If she doesn't have nerve damage and like lose the
Use
the
of
use
something.
something should not work anymore after getting shot like in the forearm.
Right.
It's just all tendon and I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well,
Where do
not
you
to
get
mention
shot in your
like
forearm?
a gut shot, and she's not exactly been living clean. I mean, Morgan helped clean her up a little bit, but she's got a gut shot. That's not something that's easy to recover from even in the best circumstances. And we have no idea what kind of medical stuff these medieval guys have going on. So, um, so there's that. But it is nice to see them make an appearance and to see that there's another faction other than the Saviors out there. So that was a little bit of a bright spot.
Yeah, the show is definitely going into Faction City. We've between Hilltop and well, RIP Library Crew.
Yeah.
We've got lots of the world really has grown a lot since getting to Alexandria. All right, but so this is kind of the end of Carol and Morgan's story for this season. Exit screen right, and then back to the fifth ambush with the log pile and the hanging men. And they're like, "Let's get out of here!" And you hear Simon's voice calling over the barricade. I mean, he has some great lines,
Yeah.
and his gleeful delivery of like, "Yeah, guys, see you soon, friend." It's just right. I feel like the tone
Yeah.
is perfect. So then Eugene has a pretty good idea. Everybody's freaking out. Rick's hair has gone full curly sweat. which you know means that he's
You
stressed
know,
out.
you know that means he's at like 1 second away from losing everything, talking to ghosts and such.
Yeah. He's got things. Eugene's like, look, let me drive the RV. I wish he would say things as simply as that, but he never does. It's always like fully aware that flip the flop and blee blee, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I don't really like the way you talk. So he says, I can drive the RV. You guys can go on foot, and it'll work out, no problem. This plan should work. This is really the straw that breaks the camel's back of the Saviors organization, because there's no way they could have eyes on the camper at all times
Mm-mm.
in the vastness of the Georgian back country, or I
At
guess
night.
they're in Virginia at night. Yes, yeah, at night they're tracking Rick's group through the forests without any kind of night vision, without any kind of UAV, without any no reconnaissance.
Nope.
They
They're
are
just doing it.
silently tracking this group of people walking through the forest, and then the whistling starts.
The
They
whistling is pretty creepy.
Whistling,
And
that's great. It's a great mechanic. It'll only work when you know you outnumber your prey.
right.
I feel like they can't have been. They must have started using this at a certain point in their existence,
Mm-hmm.
and they managed to funnel. And it's way too neat. They managed to
Mm-hmm.
funnel Rick's group into this amphitheater of cars, and there's their camper, and Eugene has already been rolled up. It's just such a perfect bow on this ridiculously complex operation that I feel like the CIA would have trouble orchestrating today.
Agreed. Agreed. But it does, finally. And I mean, I think that that's part of why I was just so annoyed by all of this. And then finally, Negan makes his entrance. With Lucille, and anybody who's read the graphic novels knows that these are two key things, and the scene that's about to unfold is a big one. But it felt I was so annoyed by this point, and even more annoyed this time round. I'm like, oh, thank God, finally we're at this. But also some relief to know that it was hopefully over soon. I didn't the first time watching this. I did not. I guess I should have anticipated that they were going to do the cliffhanger. And because of the discrepancy with what they do with the show and the books, I knew that whoever that they killed would be up for debate and everybody would be losing their minds. Though there is a scene in this that led me to believe that it was going to be one of the people that it was. So that was you know that was okay, I guess. But it was still, after the many, many cliffhangers that we have seen during this season, to leave it with
Yeah.
this one, to me, is just poor, poor, poor show, my friends. But
It didn't sit well with me either, although I didn't really care all that much, which I think was a bad sign.
yeah,
I did not think it was going to be Glenn by the end of this episode because of all the near brushes with death that he had. The whole dumpster thing, I mean, the one where he was surrounded by zombies and they shot them away from him with a machine gun they didn't even like treat that as a near death experience, which is just so sad for the show, frankly.
yeah.
But the fact that he had done the whole dumpster scene made me think, nah, there's no way they're going to go back to that well so soon.
See, I thought of the opposite thing. I thought of it in an opposite way. I thought that all of those near brushes with him was their long goodbye to him.
Such a long goodbye.
A
Which
very long goodbye, and I really thought that it was almost like they were deliberately crying wolf all those times, and then they were going to just drop the curtain on him, which is what happened. So,
well, he is the one who was killed in the comic book, and
yep,
it's not a cliffhanger. I
nope.
feel like they kill him, and then there's a few more pages left in the book.
Yeah, but it's
It's
pretty immediate. I mean, what tipped me off, if the long goodbye thing that I was thinking didn't, is that he very distinctly says Maggie, and because he sees her like on the whatever she is, and like because she's so ill looking and stuff like that, and that is the line in the book in this scene, which that's I was like, oh well, they're gonna go there, and as he's dying, he does it, I think, in the graphic novel. But just the fact that they used it made me think that it was going to be him. So,
well, we won't find out until we do our season 7 review, which I think is going to be a while. We're not going to do that for a while.
no, because we have something else coming up. So let's round this out. So basically, they left this with all of our survivors in pretty dire straits. Other than Morgan and Carol, though Carol could be argued that she's in dire straits. And then the Alexandrians are definitely under threat. If there will probably be an imminent attack from what it seems. And there was lots of anger related to this before going into the next season. So that's kind of tough. But I agree. I don't think we should be dealing with season 7 yet, because we've got another thing to complain about, which is Fear the Walking Dead starts up pretty soon.
You say complain. I say get psyched.
You like it a little bit more than I do. I do
I
like
just,
I like
I'm
a
an
couple.
optimist.
I know, and I like a couple of the characters in this, and I like a couple of the storylines. I wish the writing was a little tighter, and I wish the storytelling was a little tighter.
It's the first season with no Chris. What's not to like?
They'll find somebody else more annoying than Chris, I am sure, to throw into this mix. They always manage to find somebody super annoying. But I will happily discuss it with you.
And now Travis is like a cold-blooded killing machine.
True. What's not to like? He's a berserker.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. And I've been seeing some clips. Social media is lousy with like preview stuff right now. You can't get through Facebook without seeing some sort of video that gives away. So now I know that there's at least at the beginning of the season, there's going to be a couple of factions that I think will be quite interesting.
Oh, see, I have not. I've avoided the trailers for this reason. So you have more info than I do.
Yeah. Well, I will not divulge any further. So, yeah, that starts on June 4th. That'll probably be our next podcast. Will probably be dealing with Fear the Walking Dead. And in the meantime, I feel like we should also mention Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Is that his name?
Yep. Negan, you mean?
Yeah. His performance, which I think has been kind of universally appreciated. People love the way that he does Negan.
Oh, he is Negan. They cast that extraordinarily well. He is exactly what I picture Negan to be like.
I kind of think he's a little skinnier. I mean, in the books, Negan is a big dude.
He's big, but I mean in the his delivery in terms of how ruthless he is.
Yeah, so I'm just saying purely on a physical level, he doesn't quite reflect the raw power, like the physical power that Negan has in the book. But he, personality-wise, definitely he has all of that down.
And I feel like he's of a build that's enough that you could imagine that he's, he does have power. I mean, he's not yes, Negan in the book is pretty beefy, almost not quite the Tyrese level, but kind of that look. So no, I see what you're saying, but the delivery in terms of personality is so good that I think that can be overlooked.
Yeah. I'm glad the season is behind us. It was not one of my favorites. We did have a couple of really good standout episodes, but they were definitely outnumbered by the ones where I was like, come on. Thank you, season 6, for being done.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
And so hang out with us again next time when we start covering Fear the Walking Dead season 3. We'll get off of the television train and do another movie here soon, because we do have to do Resident Evil.
That's true.
And now we have
like an impetus. Now that they're rebooting everything, we got to get through that before they start that stuff up.
I'm sure that'll be years away, I hope. And we still have a couple of zombie movies that should be coming out this year, like Patient Zero, which is the Matt Smith one, I think, and the Natalie Dormer. And World War Z 2 was supposed to come out in 2017, but I think it's kind of been delayed.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's just going to be... But I look forward to it now, given who is attached to it. I am very much on board with seeing what they do.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. And, what with The Boy on the Bridge, as we talked about last episode, there's probably a movie for that coming out. Maybe not for a year or two. And that's, pure speculation, but that could be something else to look forward to. However, in the meantime, if you would like to chime in, you can get a hold of us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. on Twitter at ReanimatedPcast, and on our website at reanimatedpodcast.com.
And until next time, when we talk about Fear the Walking Dead, ciao.
See ya.